Few cars in history look like they've landed from another planet. But in 1959, Cadillac unveiled something so daring, so futuristic, that even today it feels more like science fiction than automotive reality. This wasn't just a car, it was a vision of tomorrow. A bubble-topped spacecraft on wheels armed with radar sensors, sliding electric doors, and technology that promised to predict the future of driving. Its name? The Cadillac Cyclone. The late 1950s in America was a time unlike any other. The nation had just entered the space age. Jet aircraft dominated the skies, rockets pierced the atmosphere, and families looked toward the future with wide-eyed optimism. Everything, from furniture to fashion to automotives, carried a futuristic aesthetic. Cars didn't just take you from one place to another, they symbolized progress, power, and possibility. General Motors, and Cadillac in particular, thrived in this atmosphere. Cadillac was already the undisputed leader of American luxury, but it wasn't enough to build large, chrome-heavy sedans. The brand wanted to be the face of tomorrow. This is where concept cars came in. They were dream machines, one-off experimental vehicles designed not for sale, but to dazzle crowds and showcase ideas. Into this context, Cadillac unveiled its most audacious vision, the Cyclone XP74. This wasn't simply a car, it was a spacecraft on wheels. Its very name, Cyclone, suggested unstoppable energy, a force of nature, and hinted at speed and danger. The design was spearheaded by Harley Earl, GM's first design chief and one of the most influential figures in automotive history. Earl was nearing retirement, and the Cyclone was among his last great statements. Working with stylist Carl Renner, he wanted to leave behind a machine that represented everything the jet age had promised, a symbol of technology, speed, and futuristic luxury. The Cyclone embodied that vision in every line. At the very front, instead of a traditional grille, two pointed cones jutted forward like the nose of a rocket or jet intake. Inside those cones were Cadillac's most futuristic experiment, radar sensors designed to detect objects ahead of the car. If a collision was imminent, the system would alert the driver with lights and sounds. Think about that. In 1959, Cadillac was already exploring collision avoidance systems that wouldn't become reality until decades later. Then there was the canopy. Instead of a roof and doors, the Cyclone had a clear acrylic bubble top, silver-coated on the inside to filter the sun's ultraviolet rays. This bubble canopy wasn't just visually dramatic, it turned the interior into a cockpit, sealing passengers away from the outside world like astronauts preparing for launch. When parked, the canopy retracted gracefully into the rear deck, supported by compressed air, while the doors slid back electrically. The result was a theatrical entrance and exit, something no production car of the time could even dream of. The side profile was equally futuristic. The car's stance was impossibly low, just 44 inches tall, with a short 104-inch wheelbase, making it look more like a fighter jet fuselage stretched onto four wheels than a Cadillac. Gone were the acres of chrome and tall tail fins that defined the brand's showroom cars. The Cyclone was pure futurism, smooth panels, dramatic proportions, and technology first. Underneath that styling, engineers were experimenting too. The 390 cubic inch Cadillac V8 was re-engineered with accessories mounted entirely at the front of the block. Alternator, steering pump, compressor, everything, so the hood line could be kept low and flat. Exhaust pipes exited not at the rear, but just ahead of the front wheels, another daring and unusual choice. And unlike most Cadillacs of its day, the Cyclone used independent suspension at all four wheels, aimed at delivering a smoother and more stable ride, a system far ahead of what luxury cars typically offered. But this bold vision wasn't without its problems. The technologies were often more conceptual than practical. The radar sensors were mostly non-functional showpieces. The doors and canopy were prone to jamming.
At its grand debut at the Daytona Speedway in 1959, the suspension system misbehaved, lifting the car awkwardly high and locking the doors shut, embarrassing for such a futuristic showcase. Engineers scrambled behind the scenes to fix it. Still, these flaws didn't diminish what the Cyclone represented. It wasn't about perfection, it was about vision. The Cyclone was Cadillac's way of saying, this is what luxury will look like in the future. This is how bold we're willing to be. In the golden glow of the jet age, the Cyclone wasn't just a prototype. It was a dream made real, a rolling prophecy of the automotive world to come. Beneath its science fiction looks, the Cadillac Cyclone wasn't just a sculpture. It was a fully functioning machine, packed with engineering experiments that pushed the boundaries of what a luxury car could be. At its heart sat Cadillac's 390 cubic-inch V8 engine, a powerhouse of the late 1950s. This 6.4-liter engine was rated at around 325 horsepower. But in the Cyclone, it was paired with something unusual. Instead of the standard 3-speed hydromatic automatic alone, Cadillac engineers added a 2-speed rear differential. This meant that, effectively, the car had 6 forward gear ratios. A remarkable idea for 1959, decades before multi-gear automatics became the norm. It was a subtle yet brilliant way of combining power and efficiency, showing that Cadillac wasn't afraid to experiment with drivetrain innovation. The chassis itself was equally bold. Unlike the heavy body-on-frame sedans Cadillac sold at the time, the Cyclone rode on a 104-inch wheelbase, far shorter and sportier than anything in Cadillac's lineup. The car stood only 44 inches tall, which is lower than many sports cars even today. To match its futuristic stance, Cadillac fitted independent suspension on all 4 wheels. While common in racing and some European sports cars, this was revolutionary for a Cadillac concept, promising smoother handling, comfort, and stability.
And then there was the exhaust system. Instead of routing to the rear, the Cyclone's exhaust pipes exited just ahead of the front wheels. This design was shocking, even controversial. Some called it impractical. Others saw it as a dramatic piece of engineering theater, a literal statement that the Cyclone played by no one's rules. The body, finished in shimmering silver, was made from lightweight aluminum panels, keeping weight down and surfaces smooth. The aerodynamic profile was clean and minimal, with none of the towering fins or chrome overload that defined Cadillac's production cars. This was deliberate. Harley Earl and his team wanted the Cyclone to stand apart as something radically different, the Cadillac of the future, not of the present. Inside, the futuristic theme continued. The bubble canopy wasn't just for show. It was coated inside with a thin silver film to block ultraviolet rays, keeping the cabin cool. When closed, it created a cockpit-like environment, sealed tight against the world outside. For ventilation and comfort, the Cyclone came equipped with automatic climate control, decades before this technology would reach production cars. And when it was time to enter or exit, the doors didn't swing open. They slid backward electrically, synchronized with the canopy. It was theater, luxury, and futurism rolled into one. But perhaps the most talked about feature was hidden in the nose cones, the radar collision avoidance system. Though primitive and not fully functional, it was Cadillac's attempt to give drivers a glimpse of automated safety. Sensors in the cones were meant to scan the road ahead and warn of obstacles with flashing lights and audible signals. In the 1950s, this was beyond science fiction, an idea so radical that many spectators doubted it could ever be real. Yet, in the 21st century, almost every modern car uses radar or LiDAR to achieve that very goal. The Cyclone was decades ahead of its time.
When Cadillac unveiled the Cyclone at the Daytona International Speedway in 1959, the crowd's reaction was electric. This wasn't a car you simply looked at. It was a car that demanded your attention. Journalists described it as a spaceship on wheels, a glimpse of the automotive world that might exist in the year 2000. The canopy, the doors, the radar cones, every element seemed like magic brought to life. But admiration was mixed with skepticism. While the styling thrilled showgoers, critics questioned how practical such a car could ever be. Could a bubble canopy really work in everyday driving? What would happen if the electronics failed? And what about those front-mounted exhausts? Were they safe or even road legal? The Cyclone's debut wasn't flawless. During its first appearance at Daytona, the automatic suspension inflated too much, lifting the car awkwardly and locking the doors in place. Engineers scrambled to fix the glitches. These moments reminded everyone that while the Cyclone looked like the future, it was still a prototype with rough edges. Despite these challenges, the Cyclone did exactly what it was meant to do. It captured imaginations. People left the showrooms and exhibitions buzzing about Cadillac's vision. Some dreamed of owning a car like it. Others dismissed it as fantasy. But nobody forgot it.
And perhaps most importantly, the Cyclone proved that Cadillac was not just a maker of big, comfortable sedans. It was a brand willing to take risks, to experiment, to dream. Even if the Cyclone would never see a production line, its message was clear. Cadillac was thinking decades ahead, and the future of luxury was more than fins and chrome. Today, more than 6 decades after its debut, the Cadillac Cyclone remains one of the most memorable concept cars ever created. Not because it sold in massive numbers, it never did, but because it captured the essence of an era when automakers weren't afraid to dream big, even if those dreams were impractical. The Cyclone represents the pinnacle of the jet age design philosophy. At a time when production Cadillacs were famous for towering tail fins and chrome-heavy styling, the Cyclone charted a completely different path. Its smooth, uncluttered body panels and futuristic canopy weren't just for shock value. They foreshadowed a coming shift in automotive design, where aerodynamics, technology, and clean surfaces would matter more than ornamental excess. In many ways, it predicted the move away from flamboyance and toward modern minimalism. From a technological perspective, the Cyclone's legacy is even clearer. That experimental radar system hidden in the nose cones, it was a primitive ancestor of today's collision warning and adaptive cruise control systems. The automatic climate control, now a standard feature in luxury cars worldwide. Independent suspension at all 4 corners, today it's a given for premium performance and comfort. Even the idea of autonomous driving was hinted at in Cadillac's vision of a self-guided car, a fantasy in 1959, but a research frontier in our own time. The Cyclone showed us that what feels like science fiction one decade can become everyday reality in the next.
But perhaps the greatest part of the Cyclone's legacy is emotional. For enthusiasts, it is a symbol of courage, proof that Cadillac once dared to push boundaries far beyond what the market demanded. It wasn't about sales, profits, or mass appeal. It was about proving that imagination belongs as much to the automobile as horsepower or steel. For that reason, the Cyclone has been called one of the greatest dream cars of all time. In terms of collectability, the Cyclone is in a category of its own. Only one example was ever built. Unlike other rare classics, it has never passed through the hands of collectors or gone under the hammer at a major auction. It has always remained in the care of General Motors, preserved in the GM Heritage Collection. This makes its market value impossible to determine. But if it ever were offered for sale, experts agree it would command millions, not because of performance specs, but because of its singularity and cultural importance. It is not a car, it is an artifact. For enthusiasts who dream of owning something like the Cyclone, the closest you can get is through replicas, scale models, or other GM concept cars that did make it into private collections. The lesson from the Cyclone is clear. With concept cars, originality and preservation matter more than drivability. These are rolling sculptures meant to inspire, not machines to commute in. Anyone who aspires to care for a car of this caliber must think like a curator, not just a driver. Insurance, storage, and exhibition are as important as maintenance. The Cyclone is also surrounded by curiosities that only add to its mystique.
At its grand debut at Daytona, the car's suspension system malfunctioned, lifting it too high and jamming the doors shut. Engineers had to work frantically just to keep the showcase from turning into a disaster. Harley Earl himself reportedly considered using the Cyclone as his personal retirement car, a testament to how much the project meant to him. The futuristic canopy, once coated with a thin silver film to protect against UV rays, eventually deteriorated, leaving the surviving car looking slightly different from its original glory. Even its exhaust system, venting just ahead of the front wheels, is a curiosity, so rare and impractical that few cars in history have attempted anything similar. These quirks only enhance the Cyclone's charm. They remind us that it wasn't a production car polished to perfection, but an experimental one-off with all the brilliance and flaws of invention. And perhaps that's why it continues to fascinate. It is both a symbol of what could have been and a time capsule of 1950s optimism, an age when cars weren't just transportation, but dreams given form. In terms of category, the Cyclone belongs firmly among the great concept cars, or dream cars. It was never a coupe, never a sedan, never a sports car. It was always something greater, a glimpse of the future.
And so, the Cyclone story continues. It has never roared down a highway in mass numbers, never filled Cadillac showrooms, and never been parked in suburban driveways. Yet it remains one of the most important cars Cadillac ever built. Because in the end, its purpose wasn't to sell. Its purpose was to inspire. And more than 60 years later, it still does. Every angle, every detail of the Cadillac Cyclone reminds us that the future has always been closer than we think. It's more than a car. It's a statement that imagination never goes out of style. If this journey through the Cyclone story inspired you, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you won't miss the next deep dive into the legends of automotive history. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and share it with fellow car enthusiasts who need to see just how bold Cadillac once dared to be. And now it's your turn. What do you think of the Cyclone? Was it a brilliant vision ahead of its time, or a wild dream too impractical for the road? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and while you're there, tell me which classic car you'd like me to explore in the next video. Your suggestions fuel this channel, and together we'll keep bringing the forgotten icons of the past back to life.